My own son was participating in this. Perfect, Tiffany practically purred. Once we're appointed her guardians, we can liquidate everything.
Look at this form right
I've already
here.
spoken with a realtor about the apartment.
They said it would be covered.
I
What are
still
we gonna
don't
do
understand
now?
why Mom would hide the lake house transfer from us, Brandon said, confusion evident in his voice. Because she's not well, honey, Tiffany said smoothly. Remember how she accused me of taking her sapphire necklace last month? The one we found in her bathroom drawer? The paranoia is getting worse. I hadn't misplaced that necklace, and I certainly hadn't accused Tiffany. I'd simply asked if she'd seen it. The gaslighting was expertly done. I guess you're right, Brandon sighed. It's just hard seeing her like this. I know, baby, but we're doing what's best for her. She can't manage on her own anymore. The call ended and I sat in stunned silence. They were attempting to establish a legal guardianship, to have me declared incompetent, and Brandon, my son, believed I was losing my mind. With shaking hands, I called my doctor's office. Dr. Matthews, please. It's Donna Davis. It's urgent. When he came on the line, I spoke quickly. Those test results we discussed, I need comprehensive neurological and psychological evaluations immediately, today, if possible. Donna, what's happening? Someone's trying to have me declared incompetent. I need to establish my mental capacity with an independent evaluation before they can force their doctor on me. There was a brief silence. Come in at 2:00 p.m. I'll have the hospital's chief neurologist and our forensic psychiatrist ready. Thank you. And doctor, everything needs to be thoroughly documented. As I ended the call, I turned back to the security feed. Tiffany was instructing the movers to wrap my late husband's favorite painting, a wedding gift from his parents. The rage I felt was clarifying. I had been too passive, too trusting. No more. The medical evaluations that afternoon were exhaustive. Cognitive tests, memory assessments, psychological evaluations. 4 hours later, Dr. Matthews delivered the results. You're one of the sharpest 60-year-olds I've ever examined, he said, reviewing the reports. No sign of cognitive impairment whatsoever. In fact, your scores are in the superior range across the board. And the heavy metals in my bloodstream? Consistent with low-dose poisoning over time, not accidental exposure. His expression was grim. We've documented everything. If you're being poisoned, Donna, you need protection. I'll get it, I promised, but first, I need to understand the full scope of what I'm dealing with. When I returned to my beach rental, there was a message from Victoria. She had discovered something that couldn't wait until morning. Tiffany Davis isn't her real name, Victoria said without preamble when I called back. Her birth name is Tiffany Winters. She's been married twice before, both times to wealthy older men. The first died under suspicious circumstances. The second survived, but lost most of his fortune. She changed her name after the second divorce. The pieces were falling into place. That explains her slip about the first husband at the anniversary party. There's more, Victoria continued. She has a prior arrest for financial elder abuse in Arizona. Charges were dropped when the victim, her former employer, died before trial. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. This wasn't just about money. I was dealing with someone potentially dangerous. We have enough for police intervention now, Victoria urged. Let me call Detective Reynolds. Not yet, I said firmly. I want more than just criminal charges. I want my son back. That evening, as I reviewed the footage of movers emptying my home, I formulated a plan. Tiffany had underestimated me because of my age. She saw gray hair and assumed weakness. She wasn't the first to make that mistake, and she would learn, as others had before her, that crossing Donna Davis was a serious miscalculation. My phone rang again, James Parker this time. Mrs. D, I just checked on Brandon like you asked. He's not good. Tiffany's got him taking something strong. He's barely coherent. Is he in danger? Not immediately, but she's definitely keeping him sedated. Said it's for his anxiety about your condition. Another piece of the puzzle. Keep Brandon medicated, convince him his mother is incompetent, then use him to gain control of my assets. The elegant simplicity of the plan would be admirable if it weren't so evil. Stay close to him, James. Don't let Tiffany know you suspect anything. After hanging up, I sat at my laptop and opened the secure folder containing the evidence I'd collected. The security footage, medical reports, financial records, and background information Victoria had uncovered on Tiffany. It was time to fight back. Not just for my sake, but for Brandon's and for everyone else Tiffany might target in the future. With methodical precision, I began organizing my counterattack. By dawn, I had a comprehensive strategy, one that would not only stop Tiffany, but ensure she could never do this again. As the sun rose over the ocean outside my rental, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Tiffany thought she was dealing with a helpless old woman. She was about to discover her grave miscalculation. The morning after discovering Tiffany's invasion of my apartment, I sat across from Victoria Morgan in her downtown office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city skyline, but I barely noticed the familiar buildings or the crisp autumn leaves swirling in the wind. My attention was fixed on the stack of evidence I'd placed on her polished mahogany desk. "This is substantial," Victoria said, reviewing the lab results showing heavy metals in my bloodstream. At 65, she still commanded respect throughout the city's legal community. Her silver bob framed a face that had seen decades of courtroom battles, and her charcoal suit projected the no-nonsense attitude that had made her my attorney for over 20 years. "And you're certain Brandon doesn't know you suspect anything?" she asked, adjusting her reading glasses. "He's being manipulated," I insisted, my voice catching. I thought of my son, his bright smile when he was a boy, his determination when he'd struggled through architecture school. The Brandon I raised would never participate in something like this willingly. Victoria nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Addiction changes people, Donna. So does love. Or what he thinks is love." "I know my son," I said firmly, though doubt gnawed at me. The image of Brandon on the phone with Tiffany, his voice slurred and distant, flashed through my mind. "She's keeping him medicated, isolated." Victoria tapped her Mont Blanc pen against the desk thoughtfully. "We need to tread carefully. If we move too quickly, they'll accelerate their plans." "What exactly are we dealing with here, legally speaking?" I asked, smoothing my skirt over my knees, a nervous habit from decades in corporate boardrooms. Victoria's expression turned grave. "Based on their conversation about Dr. Winters and guardianship paperwork, they're pursuing an adult guardianship petition. They'll claim you're mentally incompetent to manage your affairs due to cognitive decline. But the medical evaluations will help enormously," she finished. "But these cases can get messy. Family testimony carries significant weight with most judges. If Brandon testifies that you've been experiencing memory loss or confusion..." My heart sank. The sunlight streaming through the window suddenly felt cold. My own son testifying against me. Victoria reached across the desk and squeezed my hand, a rare gesture from my usually stoic attorney. "There's something else you should know about Tiffany. I had my investigator dig deeper after our call last night." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a mugshot of Tiffany, younger, with darker hair, but unmistakably her. The name beneath the photo read Tiffany Ann Winters. "She was arrested in Phoenix 3 years ago," Victoria said, her voice dropping lower though we were alone in her office. "She was working as a home health aide and defrauded an elderly patient of nearly $200,000. The charges were dropped when the victim died before trial." I stared at the mugshot. a chill running through me. Was that all? Victoria's eyes met mine directly. 6 months later, she was working at a pain management clinic in Tucson where she met a wealthy widower named Harold Bennett. They married within 2 months. He died within a year under suspicious circumstances. Suspicious how? I barely recognized my own voice. Gradual cognitive decline, followed by organ failure. The autopsy showed elevated levels of heavy metals, but not quite enough to definitively rule it poisoning. My blood ran cold. Was she charged? There was an investigation, but nothing stuck. She inherited everything, changed her name, and moved here. Victoria's eyes locked with mine. This isn't her first attempt at this scheme, Donna. This is a practiced predator. I stared at the mugshot, thinking of how Tiffany had insinuated herself into our lives, into my son's life. The calculated nature of it made me feel physically ill. Does Brandon know any of this? Victoria shook her head. Unlikely. The name change makes it difficult to uncover without specialized resources. I stood and walked to the window, watching people rushing along the sidewalks below. Normal lives, untouched by the kind of betrayal I was facing. What's our next move? I asked, my back still turned. We continue gathering evidence while preparing legal countermeasures. The medical evaluations were excellent foresight. We'll need to be ready when they file the guardianship petition. When I turned back, Victoria was watching me with a curious expression. What is it? I asked. Most clients in your situation would be falling apart. You're remarkably composed. A small, tight smile crossed my face. I've been underestimated my entire life, Victoria. First as a female accountant in the 1980s, then as a widow, now as an aging woman. I've learned to use that misconception to my advantage. She nodded appreciatively. Good, because Tiffany is underestimating you too, and that's her biggest mistake. As I gathered my purse to leave, Victoria's assistant knocked and entered without waiting. Mrs. Davis? There's a Catherine Davis in the reception area asking for you. Says she's your sister. I froze, my hand tightening on the leather strap of my bag. Catherine, here? Victoria raised an eyebrow. Problem? We haven't spoken in nearly 2 years, I explained, feeling a familiar tension creep up my neck. Not since our last argument about our mother's estate. Catherine and I had a complicated relationship that stretched back to childhood. 2 years apart in age, we'd grown up in constant competition. She was always more outgoing, more popular, while I was the serious, studious one. Our parents had unconsciously fostered the rivalry, comparing our achievements, our appearances, our choices. When our mother died, the tensions that had simmered for decades boiled over into a bitter dispute over a collection of antique jewelry, pieces that held sentimental rather than monetary value. Would you like me to tell her you're not available? Victoria's assistant asked. I considered it, then shook my head. No, show her in. Catherine entered like a storm front, all dynamic energy and sharp edges. At 58, she remained strikingly beautiful, with the same auburn hair we'd shared in youth, though hers was clearly colored now. She wore an expensive blazer and designer jeans that emphasized her still slim figure. The scent of her signature perfume, something French and exclusive, announced her presence before she even spoke. There you are, she said, as if we'd been searching for each other. I've been trying to reach you for days. Hello, Catherine, I replied carefully. This is my attorney, Victoria Morgan. Catherine barely glanced at Victoria. Brandon called me. He's worried sick about you, Donna. Says you've been having episodes. Memory problems, paranoia. Her eyes narrowed. Now I find you with an attorney? What's going on? I exchanged glances with Victoria, who gave a subtle nod. I think we should discuss this privately, I sadly said. Would you like to get coffee? 20 minutes later, we sat in a quiet corner of an upscale cafe. I studied my sister's face as she stirred her latte. We shared the same high cheekbones and straight nose, but time had etched different stories on our features. Brandon says you accused Tiffany of stealing, Catherine began without preamble. That you've been forgetting conversations, getting confused about basic things. And you believed him without even calling me? I kept my voice neutral, though the hurt ran deep. Catherine's shoulders stiffened defensively. He's worried. They both are. Said you've been refusing help. Did he tell you they're trying to establish a guardianship? To have me declared incompetent? Her eyes widened slightly. He mentioned you might need supervision for your safety. Is that so terrible? You live alone, Donna. By choice, I countered. I'm perfectly capable of managing my life. Catherine leaned forward, lowering her voice. Brandon showed me a video of you. You were disoriented, couldn't remember what day it was. Said something about people stealing your things. I felt a chill. They were manufacturing evidence. When was this video taken? Last month, I think. At their house? Last month. After one of Tiffany's special tea sessions. I took a deep breath. Catherine, I need you to listen carefully. I'm not experiencing cognitive decline. I'm being poisoned. Her eyebrows shot up. Poisoned? My God, Donna, do you hear yourself? This is exactly what Brandon was talking about. I have medical proof, I said firmly. Lab results showing heavy metals in my bloodstream. Comprehensive neurological exams confirming I'm completely sound mentally. Catherine stared at me, uncertainty flickering across her face. Heavy metals? I explained everything. The tea, the symptoms, the medical evaluations, the security cameras. With each detail, her expression shifted from skepticism to confusion, though not quite to belief. That's hard to believe, she said finally, stirring her coffee unnecessarily. It sounds like something from a movie, not real life. So is the fact that my son and his wife are trying to steal my home and assets, I replied. Reality can be stranger than fiction. Catherine studied me, conflict evident in her eyes. We'd never been close, but we were still sisters. There was history between us, not all bad. If what you're saying is true, she said slowly, why haven't you gone to the police? I'm building a case. I need irrefutable evidence. She shook her head. Always the methodical one, even now. I reached for her hand across the table, a gesture I hadn't made in years. I need your support, Catherine. They'll try to use you against me. She didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. I need to think about this. Talk to Brandon myself. Be careful what you say to him, I warned. Tiffany controls everything around him now. As we parted outside the cafe, Catherine hesitated. For what it's worth, you don't seem confused to me. You seem like the same stubborn, overly cautious Donna you've always been. It wasn't exactly a warm endorsement, but coming from Catherine, it felt like support. I watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the pavement, wondering if I had found an ally or created another complication. Later that afternoon, Brandon called. My heart leapt at seeing his name on my phone screen. Mom? His voice sounded distant, slightly slurred. Where are you staying? Tiffany says you left the beach house. I'm with Victoria, I said carefully. Brandon, are you all right? You sound different. Just tired. Been having trouble sleeping. There was a pause. Mom, we need to talk about what's happening. The doctor says you need help. Which doctor, Dr. Winters? The one Tiffany selected? He sighed heavily. See, this is what I'm talking about. This paranoia about Tiffany. She's trying to help you, Mom. We both are. Brandon, listen to me. I'm completely fine. I've had independent medical evaluations that confirm it. Then why did you install secret cameras to spy on us? His voice hardened. That's not normal behavior, Mom. So Tiffany had told him about the cameras. I installed security in my own home after things started disappearing. Things like the necklace we found in your bathroom drawer, the one you accused Tiffany of stealing. My grip tightened on the phone. Brandon, you're being manipulated. Tiffany isn't who you think she is. I know exactly who my wife is, he snapped, suddenly defensive. She's the only one who stood by me through everything, the accident, the pain, the recovery. While you were busy judging me, she was actually helping me. The accusation stung. That's not fair. I tried everything to help you. Your way, always your way. His voice was bitter. Tiffany accepts me as I am. There was muffled conversation in the background, and Brandon's tone changed abruptly. I need to go. Dr. Winters wants to schedule your evaluation. His office will call you. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat heavily on Victoria's guest bed, feeling the distance between my son and me stretching into an unbridgeable chasm. 10 minutes later, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Mrs. Davis, this is Dr. Gregory Winters. Your son Brandon has expressed concerns about your health. I'd like to schedule an evaluation at your earliest convenience. So it had begun. The offices of Dr. Gregory Winters were expensively decorated in soothing blues and grays. Abstract art hung on walls painted in calming tones. Fresh flowers adorned the reception desk, and soft classical music played from hidden speakers. Everything designed to create an impression of professional competence and clinical authority. I sat stiffly in a leather armchair as Dr. Winters reviewed the forms I'd been asked to complete. He was in his 50s with a carefully trimmed beard and glasses that he peered over rather than through. His white coat was pristinely pressed, and an impressive array of degrees decorated his wall. Mrs. Davis, your son tells me you've been experiencing some cognitive difficulties, he began in a gentle, measured tone. Memory lapses, confusion, perhaps some paranoid ideation. His voice was condescending, the tone one might use with a child or a pet. It immediately set my teeth on edge. I've experienced symptoms when visiting my son and daughter-in-law, I replied carefully, particularly after consuming beverages they prepare. He made a note on his tablet, his expression neutral. And you believe these drinks contain harmful substances? I have medical evidence of heavy metals in my bloodstream, doctor. I'd be happy to provide the lab results. Another note. We'll get to that. First, I'd like to run through some standard cognitive assessments. What followed was a series of tests clearly designed to emphasize any potential confusion or memory issues. Questions were asked in deliberately convoluted ways. When I answered correctly, he would often repeat the question as if I hadn't understood. Can you tell me today's date, Mrs. Davis? Monday, October 14th, 2024. And are you certain about that? Take your time. Completely certain. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens, to recall a list of words after a delay, to explain proverbs. I completed each task flawlessly, watching his frown deepen with every correct response. Your son mentioned you accused your daughter-in-law of stealing from you, he said finally, setting aside his tablet. My sapphire necklace disappeared. I asked if she had seen it. But you specifically suspected her? I chose my words carefully. I simply asked if she had seen it. The necklace later reappeared in my bathroom drawer, a place I had already checked multiple times. Dr. Winters made another note. Mrs. Davis, sometimes as we age, we misplace things and then create narratives to explain these memory lapses. It's quite common and nothing to be ashamed of. I'm aware of how memory works, Doctor. I'm also aware of gaslighting techniques. His eyebrows rose. Gaslighting? That's quite an accusation. It's quite a technique, I replied evenly. By the end of the 2-hour evaluation, Dr. Winters' friendly demeanor had cooled considerably. I had performed too well on his tests, refused to show confusion, and challenged his leading questions. "I'll compile my report and send it to the court," he said, not quite meeting my eyes as he showed me out. "I'm sure you will," I replied, standing to leave. "I've also had independent evaluations performed by Dr. Matthews and his team at University Hospital. I assume you'll want those records for comparison?" A flash of surprise crossed his face. "Yes, that would be helpful. My attorney will provide them." I smiled pleasantly, "along with the toxicology reports." As I left his office, I called Victoria. "Dr. Winters just evaluated me. He wasn't pleased when I performed well on his tests." "As expected," Victoria replied, her voice tight. "I received notification this morning. They've officially filed for guardianship. Emergency hearing is scheduled for next week." My stomach tightened. "So soon?" "They're claiming urgent circumstances, that you're in immediate danger due to your condition." I stepped into the elevator, my mind racing. "We need to accelerate our timeline." "Agreed. I've scheduled you with Dr. Sarah Coleman for tomorrow. She's the city's top forensic psychiatrist. Her evaluation will carry significant weight with the court." When I returned to my beach rental, there was a message waiting from Frank Wilson, the building manager. "Mrs. Davis, I'm sorry, but I've been instructed not to allow you access to your apartment when you return. Mr. and Mrs. Davis have filed paperwork showing they have temporary control of the property until a court hearing. I'm really sorry about this. I tried to call you earlier but couldn't reach you." I sank onto the edge of the bed, the reality of my situation hitting me with full force. They were moving faster than anticipated, cutting off my access, isolating me further. My phone rang again. James Parker this time. "Mrs. D, they've changed the locks on your apartment. Brandon looks terrible. He's barely coherent most of the time. Tiffany's got him on something strong." "Have you been able to speak with him alone?" I asked, pacing the small confines of the beach house bedroom. "Briefly. She monitors his calls, but I managed to get him outside for a few minutes yesterday. He's convinced you're experiencing dementia like his grandmother did. Says there's video evidence." "They've manufactured something," I said, "probably recorded me when I was under the influence of whatever Tiffany puts in that tea." There was a pause. "Mrs. D, there's something else. I overheard Tiffany on the phone with someone in the real estate business. She specifically mentioned selling the apartment to someone named Marcus as soon as the guardianship is granted." "Marcus Hebert?" I asked, stopping mid-pace. "I think so. Does that name mean something?" Marcus Hebert was a real estate developer known for converting historic buildings into luxury condos. He'd been trying to buy units in my building for years, offering well above market value. "It means they already have a buyer lined up," I said grimly. "They're planning to sell my home out from under me the minute they get control." "What do you need me to do?" James asked, the determination in his voice reminding me of why he and Brandon had been such close friends since childhood. "Keep gathering information," I told him. "And if possible, try to record any conversations Tiffany has about selling my property or about Brandon's medication. Be careful, though. She's dangerous." That night, as I tried to sleep in the unfamiliar beach house bed, I received a text from Catherine. "Spoke with Brandon. He's showing me more videos tomorrow. Still processing what you told me." I stared at the ceiling, wondering what doctored evidence Tiffany would present to my sister. The sense of being systematically cut off from my support system was overwhelming. First my son, now my sister, soon my home and finances. Tiffany was methodically isolating me. The following morning, I met with Dr. Sarah Coleman, the forensic psychiatrist Victoria had recommended. Unlike Dr. Winter's plush office, her space was practical and functional. No soothing artwork or mood lighting, just clean lines and efficient design. Dr. Coleman herself was a sharp contrast to Winters. In her early 40s, with short-cropped hair and penetrating eyes, she projected competence rather than nurturance. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "Mrs. Davis, I've reviewed your medical records and the lab results," she began without preamble. "I've also seen the petition for guardianship. I understand the time constraints we're under." Her evaluation was thorough but straightforward. No tricks, no leading questions. She administered standardized tests, recorded my responses to various scenarios, and observed my problem-solving approaches. "Based on my assessment," she said after 2 hours, "you show no signs of cognitive impairment. Your memory, reasoning, and judgment are all well within, actually above, normal parameters for your age." "Will that be enough for the court?" I asked, a note of desperation creeping into my voice despite my best efforts. Dr. Coleman's expression turned serious. "It should be, but guardianship cases can be unpredictable. Family testimony often carries significant weight, especially when there's a son involved. If Brandon testifies that he's witnessed confusion or memory issues, he will. They've manufactured evidence, videos of me when I was drugged." She nodded grimly. "Then we need to explain those episodes. The toxicology report helps, but we'll need to establish a pattern of exposure coinciding with your symptoms." I left her office feeling slightly more hopeful, only to have that hope dashed almost immediately. As I checked my phone, I found an email notification that chilled me to the core. "Alert, camera number 3, living room. Movement detected." Someone was in my apartment again. I quickly logged into the security system from my phone. The living room camera showed Tiffany methodically searching the room, examining objects carefully, looking behind picture frames. She was hunting for cameras. My heart rate accelerated as I watched her approach the antique clock on the mantel, the one containing one of James's hidden cameras. She examined it closely, turning it over in her hands. Then her expression changed. She'd found it. "I knew it!" she hissed, holding the tiny camera up to her face. "Spying on us, just like I told Brandon." She didn't destroy the camera. Instead, she placed it back exactly as she'd found it, a triumphant smile on her face. This was exactly what she wanted. Evidence of my paranoia to present to the court. I immediately called James. "She found the clock camera," I said without greeting. "She's using it as evidence against me." "But not the others." "Not yet. She's still looking." "The bedroom and kitchen ones are better hidden," James assured me. "But this isn't good, Mrs. D. She'll use this to support her claim that you're paranoid." "I know. Call Victoria for me. She needs to know what we're up against." As I ended the call, I received a text from Catherine. "Just saw the videos. Donna, you look really confused in them. Not like yourself at all. We need to talk." Another piece of Tiffany's plan falling into place. The noose was tightening. That afternoon, I received the official notice that a temporary emergency guardianship hearing had been scheduled for the following day, much sooner than Victoria had anticipated. Tiffany was accelerating her timeline. Victoria called moments later. "Donna, they're moving fast. Dr. Winters has submitted his preliminary report claiming you show signs of paranoid ideation and early-stage dementia. They've requested an emergency temporary guardianship pending the full hearing." "Can they do that?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "Unfortunately, yes. If they convince the judge there's imminent danger to you or your assets, a temporary order can be granted before the full hearing." "What about Dr. Coleman's evaluation?" "We'll submit it, but with the expedited timeline." Victoria's voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish the thought. It might be too late. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse with Victoria for the emergency hearing. The proceeding was brief and devastating. Judge Ellison, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed Dr. Winters' report, watched a cleverly edited video showing me disoriented and confused after consuming Tiffany's tea, and heard Brandon's testimony that I'd been installing surveillance equipment due to paranoid delusions. Victoria fought valiantly, presenting Dr. Coleman's preliminary findings and the lab results showing heavy metals in my system. But it wasn't enough. Given the concerning behavior and potential risk, I'm granting a temporary guardianship to Brandon Davis, with his wife Tiffany Davis as alternate guardian, Judge Ellison ruled. This will remain in effect until the full hearing next week. I felt physically ill. Within minutes, I had lost control of my finances, my property, and even my medical decisions. Brandon wouldn't meet my eyes as he left the courtroom with Tiffany, whose face betrayed a fleeting smile of triumph. "This is just temporary," Victoria assured me as we left. "We'll be better prepared for the full hearing. We have Dr. Coleman's complete evaluation, and I'm filing subpoenas for their financial records. We'll expose their plan." But her words provided little comfort as I realized I was now effectively homeless. I couldn't return to my apartment or access my accounts. Everything I had worked for my entire life was suddenly beyond my reach. "You'll stay with me," Victoria said firmly, seeming to read my thoughts. "I have a guest suite that's entirely private. We'll use this time to prepare our case thoroughly." That night in Victoria's elegant townhouse, I received a call from James. "Mrs. D, something big just happened. I was having dinner with Brandon, trying to talk some sense into him, when Tiffany got a call. She went into another room, but I could hear her. She was talking to someone about selling your apartment immediately." "That's not possible," I said. "Even with the temporary guardianship, they'd need court approval for a sale. She mentioned something about a quit-claim deed with your signature. Said it was dated last month." My blood ran cold. "I never signed anything like that." "I think it's forged, Mrs. D, and there's more. She specifically mentioned moving the proceeds offshore before the full hearing next week." I felt suddenly lightheaded. "She's planning to disappear with the money." "Exactly. And—" James hesitated. "I don't think she's planning to take Brandon with her." "What do you mean?" "She was talking about leaving the addict behind." Those were her exact words. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Tiffany wasn't just after my money. She was planning to strip everything of value and abandon my son once she had what she wanted. I called Victoria immediately to relay what James had heard. "This changes everything," Victoria said. "If she's planning to use a forged deed, that's criminal fraud. I'll request an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning to prevent any property transfers, and I'll alert the district attorney's office." But even as we formulated our legal response, I received a crushing text from Catherine. "I've decided to help Brandon and Tiffany with your care. You need support, Donna, whether you want to admit it or not. I'll be staying in your guest room until things are settled. My own sister, now living in my home, allied with the woman who was systematically destroying my life." The betrayal was almost unbearable. I couldn't sleep that night, haunted by images of Tiffany in my home, selling my possessions, drugging my son, manipulating my sister. The temporary guardianship had given her almost complete control. I felt powerless in a way I had never experienced before. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Made contact with detective who investigated Tiffany's first husband's death in Arizona. He kept samples, wants to help. This could be the break we need." I stared at the message, a faint glimmer of hope emerging from the darkness. If we could prove Tiffany had a history of poisoning, perhaps we could stop her before she disappeared with my assets and abandoned my son. The days before the full guardianship hearing passed in a blur of legal preparation and mounting tension. Victoria worked tirelessly, filing motions, gathering evidence, and preparing our case. Dr. Coleman's final report conclusively showed I had no cognitive impairment, while the toxicology results confirm the presence of heavy metals consistent with gradual poisoning. But Tiffany was moving faster than we anticipated. Through James's updates and my remaining hidden cameras, we learned she had already contacted a realtor about listing my apartment and was sorting through my valuables, creating an inventory of items to sell. Most disturbing was Brandon's deteriorating condition. James reported he was increasingly sedated, sleeping most of the day, and barely aware of his surroundings. Tiffany explained his state to visitors as stress over his mother's condition, but James suspected she was deliberately keeping him medicated to prevent him from asking questions. 3 days before the hearing, Victoria received a bombshell. "The detective in Arizona sent us something," she said, placing a folder on her desk. The samples from Tiffany's first husband and the elderly patient who died under her care were retested using newer methods. The toxicological signature matches what's in your system, a specific combination of heavy metals and herb-derived compounds. "Is it enough to prove she's poisoning people?" I asked, hope rising in my chest. "Not conclusively for a criminal case, but certainly enough to raise serious questions in the guardianship hearing." Victoria tapped the folder. "More importantly, it establishes a pattern that aligns with your allegations." Later that day, I received an unexpected text from Frank Wilson, the building manager. "Mrs. Davis, I need to tell you something important. Can we meet?" Victoria insisted on accompanying me to the coffee shop where Frank had suggested meeting. He arrived looking nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "Davis, I haven't been honest with you," he began, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Tiffany paid me to testify that I'd seen you confused and disoriented in the lobby several times." Victoria leaned forward. "Paid you how much, Mr. Wilson?" $5,000, with another 5 promised after my testimony. He couldn't meet our eyes. "She said it would be easy money, that you were clearly unwell anyway." "And you agreed to perjure yourself?" Victoria's tone was ice cold. Frank flushed. "I needed the money. My daughter's medical bills." He shook his head. "But I can't go through with it. Not after what I overheard yesterday." "What did you hear?" I asked, barely daring to hope. "Tiffany was in the lobby, talking on her phone. She didn't know I was in the maintenance closet nearby. She was talking about selling your apartment immediately, moving money overseas, and—" He hesitated. "She said something about making sure Brandon wouldn't be able to testify if he suddenly developed a conscience. Said she had enough medication to keep him compliant through the hearing." Victoria's expression darkened. "Mr. Wilson, would you be willing to provide a sworn statement about what you've just told us?" He nodded, looking miserable but determined. "Yes, and there's something else." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I recorded her giving me the money and coaching me on what to say. I was going to use it as insurance if she didn't pay the second half, but it's yours if it helps." The video showed Tiffany in the lobby of my building speaking with Frank. The security camera angle captured them clearly. $5,000 now, another 5 after your testimony," Tiffany was saying, handing him an envelope. "Just say you've seen her wandering confused, maybe trying to enter the wrong apartment, that she sometimes doesn't recognize you." Frank nodded, taking the envelope. "And if someone asks me about this under oath?" Tiffany's laugh was chilling. "No one will. Trust me, by the time this reaches a real hearing, we'll have liquidated everything and be long gone. Brandon doesn't even realize what's happening half the time anymore." Victoria's smile was predatory. "Mr. Wilson, you've just handed us exactly what we need." The next day, the courthouse was buzzing with activity as we arrived for the full guardianship hearing. I spotted Brandon and Tiffany near the entrance, with Catherine beside them. Brandon looked pale and unfocused, his movements slow and uncertain. Tiffany held his arm tightly, whispering instructions in his ear. Catherine looked uncomfortable, repeatedly checking her phone as if hoping for an escape. "Remember," Victoria murmured as we walked in, Let me handle everything. Don't react emotionally, no matter what they say. The courtroom was more crowded than the emergency hearing had been. Judge Ellison reviewed the case file, her expression unreadable. Tiffany's attorney, an expensively dressed man named Richard Porter, presented their case first, calling Dr. Winters to testify about my alleged cognitive decline. In your professional opinion, Dr. Winters, Porter asked, is Mrs. Davis capable of managing her own affairs? Based on my evaluation, no, Winters replied confidently. She exhibits classic signs of early-stage dementia, complicated by paranoid ideation. She installed surveillance equipment in her home to catch people she believes are stealing from her. She believes her daughter-in-law is poisoning her. These are textbook paranoid delusions. Brandon testified next, his speech slightly slurred, his gaze unfocused. He described finding me confused, forgetting conversations, accusing Tiffany of theft. The performance was heartbreaking to watch. My son, clearly under the influence of something, testifying against me. Then came Catherine. As she took the stand, she glanced at me briefly, an unreadable expression crossing her face. Ms. Davis, what have you observed about your sister's behavior in recent months? Porter asked. Catherine cleared her throat. Donna has always been strong-willed and independent. She's also always been cautious, some might say paranoid. And recently, have you seen changes in her behavior? Catherine hesitated, looking at Tiffany, then back at me. Something shifted in her expression. Actually, I have concerns about what's happening here. Porter frowned. Could you elaborate? Yesterday I found documents in Donna's apartment, documents I wasn't supposed to see. A quitclaim deed for her beach property with what looked like her signature, but dated during a period when I know she was out of the country. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Porter looked startled. Davis, that's not relevant to... I also overheard Tiffany on the phone discussing plans to sell Donna's apartment immediately after this hearing and move the proceeds offshore. Catherine's voice grew stronger. And I've watched my nephew deteriorate rapidly under Tiffany's care. He's being kept sedated. Judge Ellison leaned forward. Ms. Davis, these are serious allegations. I have evidence, Catherine said firmly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. This contains the forged quitclaim deed I found, along with recordings of Tiffany's phone conversations about selling Donna's property and abandoning Brandon once she has the money. Tiffany stood up, her face contorted with rage. She's lying! She's as crazy as her sister! Sit down, Mrs. Davis, Judge Ellison ordered sharply. She turned to Victoria. Counselor, it seems you have a witness eager to testify for your client instead. Victoria rose smoothly. Your Honor, in light of these new allegations, I'd like to call several additional witnesses and present evidence that directly contradicts the petitioner's claims. Over the next 2 hours, Victoria methodically dismantled Tiffany's case. Dr. Coleman testified about my excellent cognitive function. The Arizona detective appeared via video conference to discuss the similarities between my case and the deaths associated with Tiffany in Arizona. Frank Wilson admitted to being bribed to provide false testimony. Most damaging was James Parker's testimony about Brandon's deteriorating condition and the analysis of the special tea Tiffany prepared, which contained both sedative herbs and substances known to cause the symptoms I had experienced. Throughout it all, Tiffany's expression shifted from confidence to concern to barely controlled panic. Her attorney repeatedly objected, but each objection was overruled as Victoria presented more evidence. The final blow came when Victoria played the security footage showing Tiffany stealing my sapphire necklace and discussing her plans to make Brandon sign the papers after the tea didn't work. Judge Ellison's face grew increasingly grave as the evidence mounted. When the presentations concluded, she called a brief recess. Upon returning, her decision was swift and unambiguous. "The petition for guardianship is denied," she stated firmly. "Furthermore, I am rescinding the temporary guardianship effective immediately. Mrs. Donna Davis is clearly of sound mind and the victim of what appears to be a concerted effort to defraud her of her assets." She turned to address Tiffany directly. "Mrs. Tiffany Davis, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges, including fraud, elder abuse, and attempted theft. You are ordered to vacate Mrs. Davis's property immediately and to have no contact with her." As the implications of the ruling sank in, Tiffany's composure finally cracked. "This is ridiculous. She's the one who's crazy. She's been spying on us, accusing me of poisoning her. Tell them, Brandon." But Brandon, perhaps sensing the shifting tide, remained silent, staring at the floor. Catherine moved to my side as we left the courtroom. "I'm sorry, Donna. I should have believed you from the beginning." "What changed your mind?" I asked as we walked slowly down the courthouse steps. "The quitclaim deed. I found it while looking for a spare charger in your study. The signature was dated during our mother's funeral week when you were with me in Florida. I knew you couldn't have signed it." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for speaking up." "That's what sisters do," she replied simply. "Even sisters who don't always get along." As we reached the bottom of the steps, I saw Brandon sitting alone on a bench, his head in his hands. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen, likely already planning her escape before criminal charges could be filed. I approached him cautiously. "Brandon?" He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and clouded. "Mom? I can't remember everything that happened. Did I really testify against you?" My heart broke at the confusion and shame in his voice. "It wasn't you, Brandon. It was the medication Tiffany's been giving you." He shook his head slowly. "I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't think clearly. She kept saying it was for my anxiety, but I felt worse and worse." I sat beside him, taking his hand in mine. It was thin, the knuckles prominent. He'd lost weight under Tiffany's care. "We're going to get you help," I promised. "Real help this time." As he leaned against me, I felt both relief and resolve. We had survived Tiffany's scheme, but the healing was just beginning. Brandon would need treatment for his addiction. I would need to secure my assets and home. And we would both need time to rebuild the trust that had been so severely damaged. But for now, it was enough to know that the tide had turned. The shadows that had been gathering around us were finally beginning to recede. "This is insane," I said, pacing Victoria's living room the morning after the court hearing. "How can Tiffany still be out there after everything that was revealed?" Detective Michael Reynolds, a square-jawed man with salt and pepper hair and 30 years on the force, watched me from the armchair. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Davis, court proceedings and criminal investigations move at different speeds. Judge Ellison has referred the case to the DA's office, but formal charges take time. Meanwhile, Tiffany is free to disappear with whatever she's already stolen," I countered, frustration evident in my voice. Victoria interjected from her position by the window. "Which is precisely why we need to move quickly with the plan we discussed." I stopped pacing and took a deep breath. The plan was risky, but it might be our best chance to ensure Tiffany faced real consequences. "Walk me through it again," I said, sitting across from Detective Reynolds. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Based on what we know, Tiffany is likely planning to flee. But she's greedy. She won't leave without trying to secure as many of your assets as possible first. We create an opportunity she can't resist," Victoria continued. "A vulnerable moment where she thinks she can get you to sign over assets directly. While recording everything," Detective Reynolds added. "We need clear evidence of criminal intent." I nodded slowly. "And Brandon?" Where does he fit into this? Victoria and Detective Reynolds exchanged glances. That's complicated, Victoria admitted. He's both a victim and, unwittingly, an accomplice. The DA will take his impaired state into account, but we need to protect him from further manipulation, I finished. Exactly, Reynolds confirmed. Your son's currently staying with his friend James, correct? Yes. James took him home after the hearing yesterday. He's agreed to keep an eye on him while Brandon begins to detox. The thought of my son going through withdrawal was painful, but necessary. The anxiety medication Tiffany had been giving him had left him addicted and foggy. We'll need to keep him away from Tiffany, Reynolds cautioned. In his vulnerable state, she might be able to manipulate him again. My phone chimed with a text from James. Brandon had a rough night, but doing better this morning, asking for you. A weight lifted slightly from my chest. My son wanted to see me. That was progress. I need to visit Brandon first, I said firmly, before we do anything else. Victoria nodded, understanding. Of course. Detective Reynolds and I can finalize the details while you're gone. An hour later, I stood outside James's modest suburban home, gathering my courage before knocking. James answered immediately, his expression a mix of relief and concern. Mrs. D, thanks for coming. He's in the living room. I followed James through the house, noting the comforting normalcy of the space. Family photos, a half-finished puzzle on the dining table, a dog's bed in the corner. So different from the sterile perfection Tiffany had created in Brandon's home. Brandon sat on the couch, wearing sweatpants and a faded college sweatshirt. His face was pale and drawn, dark circles under his eyes. But his gaze was clearer than I'd seen in months. Mom, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. When he stood to hug me, I could feel the tremors in his body, withdrawal symptoms beginning to manifest. Brandon, I whispered, holding him close. I'm so sorry about all of this. He pulled back, shaking his head. I'm the one who should be apologizing. I testified against you. I let her convince me you were losing your mind. You weren't yourself, I said, leading him back to the couch. She was medicating you. I know that now. James showed me the lab results from my blood test this morning. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Benzodiazepines, sedatives, who knows what else mixed into those anxiety pills she kept pushing on me. James discreetly left us alone, murmuring something about making coffee. How much do you remember? I asked gently. Brandon stared at his hands. It's all fragmented. I remember Tiffany saying you needed help, that you were having episodes like Grandma did before her dementia diagnosis. She showed me videos of you looking confused, disoriented. After she'd put something in my tea, I explained. He nodded miserably. I should have known. You've always been sharp as a tack. He looked up suddenly. The cameras in your apartment. You installed those because you suspected something was wrong, didn't you? Yes. James helped me set them up. And they caught Tiffany stealing, talking about selling your apartment. His voice broke. I was so blind, Mom. So completely manipulated. She's a predator, Brandon. She's done this before. His eyes widened. What do you mean? I hesitated, wondering how much to reveal, then decided he deserved the full truth. Her real name is Tiffany Winters. She was investigated for the suspicious death of her first husband in Arizona. Before that, she was arrested for defrauding an elderly patient while working as a home health aide. Brandon's face drained of color. Oh, God. He leaned forward, putting his head in his hands. I brought her into our lives. I let her hurt you. You were vulnerable after your father died in the accident, I said, placing my hand on his back. She targeted you deliberately. He straightened up, wiping his eyes. What happens now? Will she be arrested? The DA is reviewing the evidence, but these cases take time. Detective Reynolds is working on a plan to gather more concrete evidence of her intentions. I want to help, Brandon said immediately. I shook my head firmly. Absolutely not. You need to focus on getting better, detoxing safely, starting therapy. But I could talk to her, get her to admit, No, I interrupted. She's dangerous, Brandon, and you're still vulnerable. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I feel so useless, so stupid. You're neither, I assured him. The best thing you can do right now is heal, for yourself and for us. As I was leaving, James walked me to the door. He's going to need professional help, he said quietly. This isn't going to be easy. I know. I'm arranging for a private addiction specialist to come tomorrow. I squeezed his arm gratefully. Thank you for being there for him, James. You're a true friend. Always have been. Always will be. His expression turned serious. Mrs. D, be careful with whatever you're planning. Tiffany called here 3 times this morning trying to speak to Brandon. When I wouldn't put him on, she got nasty. Said things were far from over. The threat sent a chill through me. We'll be careful. Keep Brandon safe. Back at Victoria's townhouse, Detective Reynolds and my attorney had finalized the plan. We've set up a meeting at Meridian Bank tomorrow morning, Victoria explained. Ostensibly for you to access your safety deposit box. The bank manager knows you're coming. We'll have plainclothes officers positioned throughout the bank, Reynolds added. And we've arranged for Tiffany to learn about your appointment. How? I asked. An accidental email from my office to her attorney, expressing concern about your plan to liquidate assets, Victoria explained with a small smile, complete with the time and location of your bank visit. You think she'll show up? Reynolds nodded confidently. From what we've seen of her behavior, she won't be able to resist an opportunity to confront you when she thinks you're trying to secure your assets beyond her reach. And when she does, we'll be ready, Victoria added. Everything will be recorded. If she makes any threats or attempts to coerce you, we'll have her. That evening, as predicted, my phone rang with a call from a blocked number. I answered and put it on speaker as Victoria and Reynolds listened. Donna. Tiffany's voice was ice cold. I understand you're visiting Meridian Bank tomorrow morning. How did you get this number? I asked, following the script we'd prepared. That's not important. What is important is that you understand something. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. The court ruled in my favor, Tiffany. The guardianship was denied. Her laugh was brittle. Courts can be persuaded to reconsider, especially when new evidence emerges. What evidence? Let's just say I have videos of you that make you look far worse than what was shown in court. Videos Brandon hasn't even seen yet. My stomach clenched at the implied threat. More manufactured evidence? Does it matter? By the time the truth comes out, I'll have what I want. Her tone shifted, becoming falsely sweet. But it doesn't have to be this way, Donna. We could come to an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Meet me at the bank tomorrow. Just you and me, no lawyers. We'll discuss terms that could be beneficial for everyone. Reynolds nodded encouragingly. She was taking the bait. I don't know, Tiffany. After everything that's happened, think about Brandon, she interrupted. He's in a fragile state right now. How do you think he'd react to seeing his mother in those videos? To hearing the things you said about him when you were not yourself? The threat was unmistakable. Fine, I said, injecting reluctance into my voice. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m., just us. Wise decision, Donna. See you then. As the call ended, Reynolds smiled grimly. She took the bait. Now we wait. The next morning, I sat nervously in a private consultation room at Meridian Bank. The safety deposit box I'd requested sat unopened on the table before me. Hidden cameras and microphones had been discreetly installed throughout the room. Detective Reynolds and 2 plainclothes officers were positioned in the main banking hall, while Victoria waited in a manager's office with a direct video feed of my room. At precisely 10:05 a.m., the door opened and Tiffany walked in. She looked immaculate as always. Designer blazer, perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. But there was something different in her eyes. A hardness, a desperation that hadn't been there before. "Donna," she greeted me with a cold smile. "So good of you to meet me." "You didn't leave me much choice," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. She remained standing, eyeing the safety deposit box. "Planning to remove valuables before they can be cataloged?" "It's my property, Tiffany. The court confirmed that." "For now." She finally sat, crossing her legs elegantly. "But circumstances change." "What do you want?" I asked directly. Her smile widened. "Direct as always. I like that about you, Donna. So refreshingly old school." She leaned forward. "I want what I've always wanted. Financial security. And you're going to help me get it." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll destroy what's left of Brandon." She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. Brandon, clearly heavily sedated, making rambling statements about my mental state. "I have dozens of these, plus evidence of his own addiction issues that would ruin his career if they became public. All it would take is one email to his firm." I forced myself to remain calm, knowing everything was being recorded. "That sounds like blackmail." "I prefer to think of it as negotiation." She put the phone away. "Here are my terms. You transfer ownership of the beach property to me, plus $500,000 in cash. In exchange, these videos never see the light of day, and Brandon never learns just how cooperative he was in my little plan." "He already knows about the videos," I countered. "And he's getting help for the addiction you fostered." Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps that Brandon was no longer under her control, but she recovered quickly. "Does he know he signed power of attorney forms giving me control of his finances? That he authorized me to act as his professional representative?" She pulled documents from her designer handbag. "Even with the guardianship denied, I still have significant legal leverage over both of you." I examined the document she slid across the table. Brandon's signature looked authentic, though I suspected it had been obtained while he was impaired. "These were signed under duress," I said. "They wouldn't hold up in court." "Perhaps, but proving that would be messy, public, and devastating for Brandon's recovery." She smiled thinly. "Or we could resolve this quietly. You give me what I want. I disappear from your lives forever. Clean break. And if I refuse, then I liquidate everything I can through these authorizations, release the videos, and let the chips fall where they may." Her expression hardened. "I always win, Donna, one way or another." I took a deep breath. "I need to think about this." "Don't think too long. My offer expires at the end of the day." She stood smoothly. "Call me when you've made your decision. The smart one, I hope." As she turned to leave, I couldn't resist one last question. "Was any of it real? Your relationship with Brandon?" She paused at the door. "He was a means to an end. Pleasant enough, but ultimately just another stepping stone." Her smile was chilling, just like the others before him. After she left, Detective Reynolds entered immediately. "We got everything. The blackmail attempt, the threats, the admission about the previous victims. It's all on tape." "Will it be enough?" I asked, my hands trembling slightly now that the confrontation was over. "More than enough for an arrest warrant," he confirmed. "But we need to move quickly. Based on what she said, I think she's planning to access accounts using those authorizations from Brandon." "She mentioned liquidating assets," I agreed. "Exactly. We need to invalidate those documents immediately and freeze everything until we can sort this out. Victoria joined us, her expression triumphant. Outstanding work, Donna. You kept her talking long enough to incriminate herself thoroughly. She pulled out her phone. I'm filing emergency motions to invalidate those documents right now. As they worked, I sat quietly, replaying Tiffany's cold admission in my mind. He was a means to an end. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. My son, his grief, his pain, his addiction, had been nothing more than tools for her to exploit. My resolve hardened. It wasn't enough just to stop her from taking my assets. She needed to face real consequences for the harm she had done. Not just to me, but to Brandon, to her previous victims, and to anyone else she might target in the future. Detective, I said suddenly, what if we could get her to admit to poisoning me? To drugging Brandon? Reynolds looked up from his phone. That would strengthen the case significantly, but she's too careful for that. Not if she thinks she's winning, I replied. Not if she believes I'm ready to give her everything she wants to protect Brandon. Victoria and Reynolds exchanged glances. What are you suggesting? Victoria asked cautiously. One more meeting. On my territory this time. The plan came together quickly. By that afternoon, Detective Reynolds had secured the necessary warrants, and Victoria had filed motions to freeze all accounts and invalidate the documents Tiffany had obtained from Brandon. Are you sure about this? James asked as he helped set up the additional cameras in my apartment. I'd been allowed to return home after the court ruling, though many of my valuables remained missing. Completely sure, I replied, watching him adjust the angle of a hidden camera in the living room. She's not just going to disappear, James. She's threatened to destroy Brandon if I don't give her what she wants. He's doing better today, James offered. The specialist you arranged came this morning. Said the physical withdrawal should peak in the next 48 hours, but he's handling it well. I nodded gratefully. Has Tiffany tried to contact him again? 3 more calls. I've blocked her number on his phone. Detective Reynolds entered from the kitchen where he'd been testing the audio equipment. Everything's set. Mrs. Davis, I want to review the safety protocols once more. He walked me through the plan meticulously, where the officers would be stationed, the code words I should use if I felt in danger, the topics I should try to guide Tiffany toward discussing. The most important thing is your safety, he emphasized. If at any point you feel threatened, use the phrase we discussed, and we'll intervene immediately. I understand, I assured him. Victoria arrived shortly after, carrying legal documents. It's done. All the accounts are frozen, and the court has issued a temporary restraining order invalidating any documents Brandon signed in the last 6 months. Has Tiffany been notified? I asked. Not officially, but she'll discover it the moment she tries to access anything, which, according to the bank, she attempted to do about an hour ago. I smiled grimly, so she'll be desperate when she arrives. Which makes her dangerous, Reynolds cautioned. Remember that. At 7:00 p.m., everything was in place. 2 plainclothes officers were positioned in the apartment across the hall, which had been temporarily vacated by its owners. Detective Reynolds and another officer were in my spare bedroom with monitoring equipment. Victoria waited in the building's management office with Frank Wilson, who had agreed to provide additional testimony if needed. I had called Tiffany earlier, telling her I was ready to make a deal and asking her to come to my apartment at 7:30. She had agreed immediately, the triumph evident in her voice. At precisely 7:28, the doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, I could see Tiffany waiting impatiently, checking her watch. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. Tiffany, thank you for coming. She brushed past me into the apartment, her eyes scanning the space critically. I see you've settled back in. Enjoying your temporary victory? Hardly temporary, I replied, closing the door. Would you like something to drink? Let's skip the pleasantries, Donna. You said you were ready to make a deal. I gestured toward the living room. Please sit. I have the paperwork prepared. She followed me, taking a seat on the sofa while I sat across from her. On the coffee table between us lay a folder containing the fraudulent transfer documents she'd requested. I've considered your terms, I began carefully. I'm prepared to sign over the beach property and provide the money you asked for, but I have conditions of my own. Her eyebrow arched. Such as? First, I want all copies of those videos destroyed. All of them. She smiled thinly. Of course. Second, I want your written agreement to leave Brandon alone permanently. No contact, no further threats. Easily done. And third, I continued, leaning forward slightly, I want to know how you did it. The tea, the medication, all of it. Before I sign anything, I want the truth. Tiffany laughed, relaxing back into the sofa. Why? So you can report me to the police? She shook her head. I don't think so. Not for the police, I lied. For my own peace of mind. I need to understand what happened to me, to Brandon, how you managed to make everyone believe I was losing my mind. She studied me for a long moment, clearly weighing whether this was a trap. But her arrogance won out, the desire to gloat over her cleverness. It wasn't particularly difficult, she said finally. The tea contained a mixture of herbs with naturally occurring scopolamine, plus a few additional elements I've perfected over the years. Enough to cause disorientation, memory issues, confusion, all symptoms that mimic early dementia. And the videos? Taken while you were under the influence, of course. Carefully edited to show only the worst moments. She smiled. Technology makes everything so much easier these days. I nodded slowly. And Brandon? What did you give him? Initially just Xanax, crushed into his food or drinks. Then, as he became more suspicious, stronger sedatives. Eventually, he was taking the pills willingly, believing they were for anxiety. Her expression was coldly clinical. Addiction is remarkably easy to foster in someone with his history. You researched him before you met him, didn't you? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Of course. I always do thorough due diligence. His previous injury, prescription history, family wealth, lack of prenuptial requirements, all ideal factors. She glanced at the folder on the table. Now about those documents. Just one more question, I said, stalling slightly. You've done this before, haven't you? In Arizona? A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly masked. My past is irrelevant. Not to me. If I'm signing over $500,000, I want to know who I'm dealing with. She sighed impatiently. Fine. Yes, there were others. A patient when I worked in healthcare. A husband who outlived his usefulness. Neither as wealthy as you, unfortunately, but educational experiences. And they never suspected? The first one was beginning to, toward the end. But convenient timing made that irrelevant. Her smile was chilling. The second never had a clue, much like Brandon. I fought to keep my expression neutral, though inside I was seething. The casual way she spoke about ruining lives, ending lives, was horrifying. I see, I said, reaching for the folder. Well, I suppose I should sign these then. That would be wise, she agreed. As I opened the folder and picked up a pen, I asked one final question. What would you have done if the guardianship had been granted? If you'd gained control of everything? Initially, the plan was to liquidate your assets gradually, making it appear you were simply downsizing in your declining state. She shrugged elegantly. After the court ruling, I had to accelerate the timeline. Brandon's power of attorney documents were my backup plan. And Brandon? Her expression hardened slightly. Once I had secured the assets, his usefulness would have ended. A convenient relapse, perhaps. A stint in rehabilitation where he could reflect on his poor choices. While you disappeared with the money, I finished. Precisely. She gestured impatiently at the documents. Now, if we're done with the confessional portion of the evening, I picked up the pen, pretended to read through the first document, then set it down again. There's one more thing I forgot to mention, Tiffany. What now? She snapped, irritation finally breaking through her composed facade. You're under arrest. Her expression froze. Excuse me? On cue, Detective Reynolds stepped out from the hallway, badge in hand. The apartment door opened as the other officers entered. Tiffany Davis, you're under arrest for attempted fraud, blackmail, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse, Reynolds announced formally. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The shock on her face was quickly replaced by fury as she realized she'd been trapped. You recorded this? You set me up? Just like you set up my son, I replied calmly. Just like you set up your previous victims. As the officers handcuffed her, Tiffany's composure cracked completely. This is ridiculous. It's her word against mine. Those recordings won't be admissible. Actually, they will be, Victoria said, entering from the hallway with a document in hand. We had a warrant for everything, and we have witnesses to your previous attempts at fraud, including Frank Wilson. You've been outplayed, Mrs. Davis, Detective Reynolds said as he read her the rest of her rights. As they led her away, Tiffany fixed me with a venomous glare. This isn't over, Donna. Not by a long shot. Actually, it is, I replied steadily. It's been over since the moment you underestimated me. After the police left with Tiffany, Victoria squeezed my shoulder. You did brilliantly. Her confession about the poisoning and her previous victims will strengthen the case enormously. I sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. I just want this nightmare to be over. It will be soon, she promised. The DA is ready to file multiple felony charges. With the evidence we have now, Tiffany's looking at significant prison time. My phone rang. Catherine. Donna? I just saw police taking Tiffany away in handcuffs. What happened? It's a long story, I replied. But she's been arrested. It's over. Thank God. Catherine exhaled heavily. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe I could come over, help you sort through things, see what's missing. The olive branch was unexpected but welcome. I'd like that, Catherine, very much. Later that night, I called James to check on Brandon. He saw the news about Tiffany's arrest online, James said. He's processing it, but I think it's actually helping. Knowing she's facing consequences, that it's really over. Can I speak with him? There was a brief pause, then Brandon's voice came on the line. Mom, is it true? They arrested her? Yes, sweetheart. She's in custody. She won't be able to hurt either of us anymore. His exhale was shaky. Good. That's good. He paused. The specialist said I can move to outpatient treatment in a week if things continue going well. I was thinking, maybe I could come stay with you after, just until I find a new place. Tears pricked my eyes. I'd love that, Brandon. Your room is exactly as you left it. Thanks, Mom. His voice cracked slightly. For everything. For not giving up on me when you had every reason to. That's what mothers do, I replied simply. We never give up on our children. After hanging up, I stood at my living room window, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in months, I felt safe in my own home, in my own skin. Tiffany had tried to make me doubt myself, to make others doubt me. But in the end, the truth had prevailed. Tomorrow would bring challenges, cataloging missing items, dealing with the aftermath of Tiffany's brief control of my affairs, preparing for the legal proceedings ahead. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply breathe, to feel the quiet triumph of having reclaimed my life. The courtroom was packed 3 months later when Tiffany's case finally went to trial. The media had latched on to the story. Predator daughter-in-law targets wealthy mother, turning it into a cautionary tale about elder abuse and financial exploitation. I sat in the front row, Brandon on one side of me, Catherine on the other. James sat directly behind us, a steady presence throughout the proceedings. The evidence against Tiffany was overwhelming. The recordings from my apartment captured her detailed confession about the poisoning. Financial records showed she had attempted to transfer funds from both my accounts and Brandon's. The medical evidence of heavy metals in my system matched the samples from her previous victims in Arizona. Most damning was the testimony of a former accomplice, a nurse who had worked with Tiffany at the pain management clinic where she met Brandon. For reduced charges in her own case, she testified about Tiffany's calculated targeting of vulnerable patients and her explicit plans to exploit Brandon's grief and injury. Tiffany maintained her innocence throughout, her attorney arguing that she was the victim of a vengeful mother-in-law's elaborate setup. But the evidence told a different story. The forensic psychologist who evaluated Tiffany described her as having clear sociopathic tendencies with a pattern of predatory behavior targeting vulnerable individuals. When it was my turn to testify, I felt a strange calm as I took the stand. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Jenkins, led me through my experience methodically. "Mrs. Davis, when did you first suspect something was wrong?" she asked. "After the third time I felt disoriented and confused following one of our family dinners," I explained. "Each time Tiffany had prepared a special tea for me." "And what actions did you take based on those suspicions?" I described the security cameras, the medical tests, the evidence gathering, all the steps I had taken to protect myself and ultimately my son. During cross-examination, Tiffany's attorney tried to paint me as paranoid, suggesting I had manufactured evidence due to disapproval of my son's marriage. "Mrs. Davis, isn't it true that you never approved of your son's relationship with my client?" he asked. "I had concerns," I acknowledged, "but I wanted Brandon to be happy. I welcomed Tiffany into our family. Yet you installed secret surveillance in your home without informing them?" "I installed security cameras in my own home after items began disappearing, and I experienced unexplained symptoms," I corrected firmly. "As the evidence has shown, those concerns were fully justified." Brandon's testimony was perhaps the most difficult to watch. Still gaunt from his recovery, he described how Tiffany had systematically isolated him, controlled his medication, and manipulated him into believing I was experiencing cognitive decline. "She would give me pills before any interaction with my mother," he explained, his voice steady despite the painful admission. "She said they were for anxiety, but they left me foggy, suggestible. When I questioned things, she would increase the dosage." "And did you knowingly participate in attempting to establish a guardianship over your mother?" the prosecutor asked. Brandon's eyes met mine briefly. "Yes," he admitted. "I believed my mother was experiencing dementia, like my grandmother had. Tiffany showed me videos, selected moments when my mother appeared confused. Now I know those episodes occurred after she'd been given the tea containing toxic substances." The trial lasted 2 weeks. When the jury returned after deliberation, the courtroom fell silent. "On the count of elder abuse in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of attempted fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit financial exploitation, we find the defendant guilty." The litany continued through all 14 counts. Tiffany sat motionless, her expression frozen in disbelief as the full weight of the verdicts sank in. At the sentencing hearing a week later, Judge Perkins reviewed the case with evident disgust. "Mrs. Davis, the calculated nature of your crimes is among the most disturbing this court has seen," he stated. "You deliberately targeted vulnerable individuals, including your own husband, with the intent of financial gain regardless of the harm caused. You showed no remorse throughout these proceedings, and indeed continue to deny responsibility despite overwhelming evidence. He sentenced her to 12 years in state prison, 5 for the fraud and financial crimes, 7 for the elder abuse and poisoning counts. As Tiffany was led away, she turned to glare at me one last time. I met her gaze steadily, refusing to look away until she was gone from the courtroom. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters gathered around us, shouting questions. Victoria handled most of the inquiries professionally, while Brandon, Catherine, and I stood together, a united front. "Mrs. Davis, how does it feel to see justice served?" one reporter called out. I considered the question carefully before answering. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention, ensuring that what happened to me doesn't happen to others. That's where my focus will be moving forward. "Any message for other families dealing with elder abuse?" another asked. "Trust your instincts," I replied firmly. "Document everything. And remember that age doesn't diminish your value or your voice." In the weeks following the trial, life gradually assumed a new normal. Brandon moved into my guest room temporarily while continuing his outpatient treatment. His recovery was challenging. There were difficult days, moments of self-recrimination, the hard work of rebuilding his sobriety and self-esteem. But there was progress, too, genuine and heartening. Catherine became a regular visitor, our relationship warming as we rediscovered common ground. The competition that had defined our relationship for decades gradually gave way to mutual respect and eventually genuine affection. "I've been thinking," she said one evening as we shared dinner on my balcony, "maybe it's time I moved back east. My lease in Phoenix is up next month and there's nothing really keeping me there." "You'd move back here?" I asked, surprised. She nodded. "If that wouldn't be too much family togetherness for you." I smiled, reaching for her hand. "I think we've earned the right to try." As for me, the experience had changed me in ways I was still discovering. I felt both stronger and more vulnerable, more aware of both human cruelty and human kindness. 6 months after the trial, I made a decision. Using part of the settlement from the civil suit against Tiffany, which included the recovery of most of my stolen property, I established the Davis Foundation for Elder Protection, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing financial exploitation and abuse of seniors. "Are you sure about this?" Victoria asked as we finalized the paperwork. "You could use that money for yourself, for retirement." "I'm sure," I replied. "What happened to me happens to thousands of seniors every year. Most don't have the resources I had to fight back." The foundation partnered with local law enforcement to provide training on recognizing elder abuse, offered legal assistance to seniors facing exploitation, and created support groups for victims and their families. Brandon, now 9 months sober, joined the foundation as a program director, using his own experience to help families recognize the signs of manipulation and isolation. His architectural firm had placed him on extended leave, but he found his new work unexpectedly fulfilling. "I never thought anything good could come from what happened," he told me one evening as we reviewed materials for an upcoming presentation. "But seeing the impact we're having, the people we're helping, it feels like maybe there was a purpose to it all." "There's always purpose in pain if we choose to find it," I replied. "Your father used to say that." Brandon smiled, the expression reaching his eyes now in a way it hadn't for too long. He was right, as usual. A year to the day after Tiffany first entered my apartment with the moving crew, I stood before an audience of social workers, law enforcement officers, and seniors at our foundation's first annual conference. "Elder abuse thrives in silence and isolation," I began. The predators who target seniors count on shame, on our reluctance to admit vulnerability, on family members too busy or distracted to notice the warning signs. I shared my story without embarrassment or reservation. The manipulation, the gaslighting, the systematic effort to make me doubt my own mind. I'm not sharing this for sympathy, I explained. I'm sharing it because knowledge is power. Because the more we bring these experiences into the light, the harder it becomes for predators to operate in the shadows. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding in recognition. After my presentation, a line of people formed to speak with me, many sharing similar experiences, others seeking advice for concerning situations in their own families. One elderly gentleman grasped my hand tightly. "Thank you," he said, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "My son's new wife has been doing exactly what you described. I thought I was imagining things. Now I know I'm not." Those moments, the recognition, the relief, the reclamation of power, made everything worthwhile. That evening, Brandon, Catherine, James, and Victoria joined me for dinner in my apartment, a celebration of sorts, marking both an ending and a beginning. "To new chapters," Brandon proposed, raising his glass of sparkling water. "To family, the ones we're born with and the ones we choose," Catherine added. "To justice," Victoria said with satisfaction. "To resilience," James contributed. I looked around at these people who had stood by me through the darkest moments, who had believed me when doubt would have been easier, who had helped me reclaim my life and transform a painful experience into something meaningful. "To all of that," I said, raising my glass, "and to the wisdom that comes from walking through fire, the understanding that age isn't weakness, that gray hair isn't irrelevance, and that underestimating someone because of their years might be the biggest mistake you ever make." Later, alone on my balcony watching the city lights, I felt a profound sense of peace. Tiffany had sought to diminish me, to erase me, to reduce me to nothing more than assets to be acquired. Instead, she had inadvertently helped me discover strengths I hadn't known I possessed, and purpose I might never have found. The predator had sought a victim and created a warrior instead. And that, perhaps, was the most satisfying justice of all. What would you do if you discovered someone close to you was attempting to manipulate your reality? How would you protect yourself and gather evidence? Comment below with your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, check out The Inheritance Switch and Grandmother's Secret Fortune, two other popular stories on our channel.